Okay, bonjour la classe. So today's lesson then I've decided to put in video form as well as in PDF on the VLE for you to access. Hopefully it makes a bit of a change and that way you'll be able to do some listening practice if you haven't otherwise been able to access ActiveLearn. This might be a way for you to do a bit of listening practice. Your date is on lesson board, so if you'd like to copy a date from there, then that would be good. Today's title is Où habites-tu? Where do you live? And our objective is to be able to describe where we live. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at where we live, from the type of house or building we live in, to the geographical area we might live in on a map, for example, which part of the country we might live in, and we're going to be looking at expressing an opinion on that too. So if you would like to pause the video then and copy down the title, date and learning objective, and I'll rejoin you on the next slide. Okay, so here we've got some key vocabulary to help you answer that question, Où habites-tu, in the fullest possible way. On the left hand side we've got the different types of building you might live in. So if you have a look there, we've got un appartement, which looks a little bit like the word apartment, and that's a flat or an apartment. We've got une grande maison, a big house, and un château, a castle. Now your writing in French doesn't have to be 100% realistic, so I've just thrown castle in for a bit of fun. You're only marked on your accuracy. Under that we've got some locations, places where you might live. We've got à Paris, à Holbeach. Next, we're talking about where your town might be located. So, ma ville est située. Okay, my town is located, or my town is situated. And then we've got different sort of areas around the country. So you could say dans le sud de l'Angleterre, okay, in the south of England. Dans le nord de l'Angleterre, in the north of England. Or one that's possibly more relevant to us, dans l'est de l'Angleterre, in the east of England. Now, if you wanted to mix it up a bit and say something like the northwest, then you do exactly what you do in English, and you would just take both the words and pop them together. So it would be something like dans le nord-ouest de l'Angleterre. Okay, again, you can be as creative as you like. It doesn't have to be truthful, just good French. So you could, for example, change the country. If you wanted to say you lived in Spain, you could say j'habite dans le sud de l'Espagne. I live in the south of Spain. Or whichever country you'd like to add. And it's always good practice to get different country names in there as well. Okay, so next as well, when you're given answers in French, more and more it's useful to say who you do things with to add some detail to your answer. In this case, who you live with. So we've got a couple of examples here. J'habite avec ma famille. I live with my family. And j'habite avec mes grands-parents. I live with my grandparents. Obviously you can change that around and modify it depending on your living situation. Okay, so underneath then we've got c'est près de, it's near, c'est loin de, it's far. Now these are two really key phrases when talking about where you live or where things are situated in French, and they're worth knowing because they just help us give a little bit more detail in our answer and make our writing a bit more interesting. Okay. To the right of that then we've got some other key phrases talking about the duration. We've lived at a certain place, so we've got j'habite ici depuis longtemps, I've lived here for a long time. Je vis ici depuis 4 ans, I've lived here for 4 years. You'll notice je vis is synonymous, it means the same thing as j'habite. Okay. And then in the right hand column we've got opinion phrases to help you express an opinion. I mean, by now we've come across an awful lot of that in year 8, so I'm sure we're all confident at saying what we like and we dislike, so there's some key vocabulary to work with there. Okay, so if you would like a further read through this slide, then feel free to pause the video. If not, I'm going to move on to the next slide and the next task. Okay, so for this task then, I'd like you to listen to the sentences that I'm going to read and note down the number of the sentence you hear. Okay, first things first, if you do want to pause the video and read through the sentences yourself to preempt what you might hear, that is a very good idea, and I suggest you do that now. Okay, so sentence number 1 then. The first sentence I'm going to read is J'habite à Holbeach avec ma famille. J'habite à Holbeach avec ma famille. So I want you to note down the number of that sentence. Next one. J'habite à Malton. Mon village est situé dans l'est de l'Angleterre. J'habite à Malton. Mon village est situé dans l'est de l'Angleterre. Number 3, third sentence. J'habite dans une grande maison. J'habite dans une grande maison. And then last but not least, the fourth sentence I'm going to read. C'est assez loin de la mer. C'est assez loin de la mer. Okay, just to run through them one more time for you then. J'habite à Holbeach avec ma famille. J'habite à Malton. Mon village est situé dans l'est de l'Angleterre. The next one. J'habite dans une grande maison. J'habite dans une grande maison. And then, c'est assez loin de la mer. C'est assez loin de la mer. Okay, so having a look then at our corrections. We've got the 4 sentences I read out highlighted in red on the board. Number 1, I live in Holbeach with my family. Number 2, I live in Malton. My village is situated in the east of England. Number 3, but obviously sentence number 5, you should have written down number 5. J'habite dans une grande maison. And then the last one that I read out, the fourth one that I read out, was sentence number 8. C'est assez loin de la mer. So it's quite far from the sea. Okay, so if you'd like to pause the video and take down your corrections in a different coloured pen, and I'll rejoin you on the next slide. Okay, so for this task then, it's a reading task that requires us to read these 4 different paragraphs and match the picture and the number to the person in question. You'll notice that I've done the example for you with 1 being equal to Jean. Number 1 down there in the south of France in an apartment is Jean. So if we have a quick look at that together then, Jean says, J'habite à Marseille, une grande ville dans le sud de la France. J'habite dans un appartement qui est assez petit mais très confortable. So, I live in Marseille, a city in the south of France. I live in an apartment that is quite small but very comfortable. So obviously on the map then we can see from the picture that he lives in the south of France. It's the only one really down there in the south. He lives in an apartment. We've got a picture of an apartment building, and then he gives some extra details about his apartment. Okay, so there we go. I'll leave you to answer the rest of those, so you can pause the video now and write your answers to the rest of the questions now. Okay, so well done on matching up the names to the pictures. Just to run you through the answers quickly then. Number 1 was Jean. As he said, he lives in the south of France in an apartment, and that matches the picture and the location of that picture. Okay, that was our example. Next one, number 2, is Thibaut. Thibaut says, J'habite dans une petite maison, which if we have a look at his picture, it is a small house, dans l'est de la France, près de la montagne. So he lives in a small house in the east of France, which he is, near the mountains. Points for anybody that can tell me which mountains he's near. Okay, next one then, number 3 is Anne. She says, J'habite dans une grande maison. I live in a big house. If we have a look at her house, it is big. And she lives in l'ouest de la France, the west of France, which leaves us with number 4 as Maxine. So give yourselves a tick if you got them correct, make any corrections that you need to make, and I'll rejoin you on the next slide. Okay then, so for this task, it requires you to look back over the reading tasks, to reread the texts and to find some key vocabulary in French for the first one and to note down the correct name on the second task. Okay, so for the first task, just to reiterate, you're finding the French equivalent of the phrases in the box, and for the second task you are writing down the name that matches the description in the sentence. Okay, so if you would like to pause the video and do that now, and I'll rejoin you on the answers. Okay, so we've got the answers here to the activities. First of all, I live is j'habite. Quite small is either assez petit or assez petite, depending on whether it's masculine or feminine. Very comfortable is très confortable. A big house, une grande maison. Near the beach, près de la plage. Far away from the sea, loin de la mer. In the west of France, à l'ouest de la France. In the south, dans le sud. In the countryside, à la campagne. And then our answers for the next task then. They live in quite a small apartment. The example there was Jean. Number 2, they live near the mountains, and the mountains that he lives near are the Alps, and that's Thibaut. Number 3, they live in a castle, that's Maxine. Number 4, they live in the centre of France, again Maxine. Number 5, they live by the sea, which is Anne. And then last but not least, they live in a small house, that's Thibaut. Okay, so the next task for you guys, the next and final task, is to translate the 4 sentences that you heard in the listening task and to then choose a further 2 sentences, so 6 sentences in total, and translate them into French. Okay, so if you want to pause the video now and do that, and I'll rejoin you on the next slide, the last slide, with the answers. Okay, so well done if you've translated all of those sentences correctly, excellent stuff. We've got the translations displayed on the screen in front of you. So if you would like to correct all of those in a different coloured pen so you can see when you went right and where you went wrong, well done to all of you, okay? And that was the last task for today's lesson. So for the next lesson this week, it will be a normal lesson. We'll resume with a normal lesson. But going forward, we might do a few more of these video lessons just to give you a bit of listening practice so you can hear a bit of pronunciation in French. I hope it was useful and see you soon.